Hey, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So, I've been sitting here, I guess, for the last 2, 3 months, wondering what the heck is going on with me. What's going on with my life? Hitting 43, and I'm like, okay, Lord, what's next? So I came back to Pittsburgh in 2021 in the middle of a pandemic. My mother was rushed to the hospital and we're like, what's going on? And we came to find out that her sodium was very high. She was delirious. She was out of it. And 4 days later or 3 days later, we get to Pittsburgh, me and my sister, to find out that as soon as my sister goes in, my mother flatlines in front of her. Not once, but twice. The nurse runs in and says, that was real. That was the turning point, the change to my life. My friend came down to comfort me at that time at West Penn Hospital. And we didn't know if my mother was going to make it. And we were not prepared for what was about to happen next. What happened was that Charlita, our mother, ended up in a acute care hospital for almost 5 months. Well, in and out for almost 5 months. And so I was back and forth between PA and Virginia, just trying to find my bearings, working from home now during the pandemic. Me and my siblings would take turns and go to the hospital every day to check up on her because the staff, when you come into the hospital, which would be like security, were very rude, distant, and cold. They had no chill, I would say, no empathy for those who were coming in the hospital. Why? Because they're there just to do a job. They have no sense of identity or no sense of purpose. Why? Because they're there to just do a job. But what about us who are mourning? What about us who are grieving? What about us who are fighting for a family on the other side, who may have cancer, who may have some illness or sickness that may not be common? It was hard. And so my mother was transferred from one hospital to the next hospital. I think she was in three different hospitals. And while she was in the acute care hospital, she was back and forth to major hospital, to that hospital, because some things they just could not do. She was fighting for her life. How many of you are fighting for your life and you have not been diagnosed with an illness or a disease? We sat by her hospital bed, encouraging her and policing doctors and nurses and trying to understand, why was she still in delirium? It says that most people are in delirium for 2 weeks. I remember going home and praying and asking God, if you want my mother to live, then you have to give me a strategy for her life. How many of you have gone to God and asked God for a strategy for your life? While my mother was laying in that hospital bed, out of her mind, I remember going through her medication and seeing that certain medications causes delirium. I went to the hospital and I said, hey, did you check this medication? I see that it could trigger delirium. They said to me, oh my gosh, why didn't we think of that? Sometimes you have people who have the title of profession, of doctor, of lawyer, of teacher, that may be falling short of the proxy or the diagnosis that you need. So my mother had a praying doctor that went to the Big Gipper, who went to Jesus Christ himself and said, What is the strategy for my mother's life if you want her to live? I had to put on my big girl pants because I knew that this was not an easy fight. We're in the middle of a pandemic. This was not easy. And every night, I would get on my knees and ask God for a strategy. And in those strategies, we saw my mom getting better each day, little by little. And we had our aunt, who's a nurse, my Aunt Cookie, who's a very sweet lady, who answered the phone, who prayed for me and my siblings, who would, allow me to be like, I think God said this. Is this right? And she would be baffled because God was speaking to us in the middle of the pandemic. And we had some life lessons. One of the lessons that we learned was that the rules that apply to everyone else don't apply to us. When you are covered in the blood, when you are walking with God, the rules that apply to others don't apply to you. They used to say back in the day that favor ain't fair. And I remember going to the hospital and they said to us that only one person can see your mom. And I said, at a time? And they said, no, the whole entire visit. And I said, okay, that's nice. But the rules that apply to everybody else don't apply to us. And because we are in the pandemic, this is a suggestion. So what I suggest to you is that one sibling will go up, come down, the next sibling will go up and come down. Why? Because we don't know if this is the last time that we will see our mother. That's number one. I think the second lesson that we learned was to listen to God's voice in the midst of chaos. And so when they were saying that certain vitamins or minerals could not help you, me and my siblings was going in and out of hospitals. And I had purchased everybody in the house air purifier that you wear around your neck. And we were taking vitamin D, vitamin C, elderberry syrup, oregano. We were doing everything to give our body a fighting chance every day while we go and advocate and support our mother. We were in the hospital and nurses were mean and would snatch my mother's arm, wouldn't come in and say hello or hi. And it was just like a routine, like they were like robots with no feeling and no emotion. And I remember one call herself like telling me off, and it took an act of God for me not to punch her in the face. And I remember saying, and my mom like leaped out of the bed, and I felt so bad because she should be healing, not fighting for her kids. And my mom leaped out the bed and I said, Mom, it's okay. I'll see you in the morning. And I went to my car and I was so angry. Like, these people are mistreating my mother and she has representation. She has family there. How are they treating the individuals within this acute care hospital who have no family, no representation? And I said, God, I need your help because I want to punch somebody in the face. I am tired. And I went, got in the car, and I can hear God say something so small, so simple. When you go to the store and you purchase a product and you don't like that product, what do? I said, take it back. You know, I used to work at Home Depot. People didn't like the toilet that they've been sitting on for 20 years. They take it back. And we would take it. And he said, so when you buy a product and it's defective, what do? You take it back to the manufacturer, you know, or you call the corporation or the CEO. And I said, yeah. And so I told my sister, I said, we have to, and I was like, I think we need to file a report against this whole entire hospital. And she said, why my mom was in it? I said, girl, why my mother is in it? Because if they're mistreating her in front of us, what are they doing when we're not there? They may not be doing anything. And I said, so the insurance company has purchased a product from the hospital called Care. They are paying good money to make sure that my mother is receiving the highest quality care. I think they want to know if she is or not. So that morning, I did some research. I called a 1-800 number and I told them how this particular hospital was mistreating my mother. And my sister, from a medical standpoint, told them all the terminologies and things that she saw that they were doing. And it was nothing but God who put that man on the phone. He was so sympathetic. He was so empathetic. He said, if that was my mother, I would be so angry. Sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, there is a time to fight. There's a time for war and there's a time for peace. In the great book of Ecclesiastes, there's a time for all things. But we must discern what time are we in? What time are we in? That night, it was my sister's turn to go to the hospital, and she's sitting in the cafeteria. As she's sitting in the cafeteria, a group of people approach her, like, what's up? And she looked up like, hello? And they said, can we talk to you for a second? And can you call your sister? So, because I'm my mom's medical power of attorney, so she calls me, and they say, why did you tell on us? So they didn't say, how come you reported us? What happened? What's wrong? They said to me, why did you tell on us? And I said, the fact that you rephrase it that way, meaning that you already know what's up. You know what's wrong. You know the mistreatment that my mother has endured. And I said, and I had to tell on you in good faith. Because if you're doing it to my mother who has representation, then most likely you're doing it to other people's families. And I will not stand for that. They say to me and my sister, worry about your mama. Worry about your mama. Don't worry about nobody else. So they said, well, we're going to go see your mom. So they go upstairs, see my mom. The CEO of this acute care hospital is washing her feet, feeding her, in tears, crying. Because that wasn't the plan, wasn't to get her fired. I wanted order, systems and processes put in place so that these people could receive the highest care. Not these burnt out wannabe nurses making all this money and doing all in the name of what? You took a vow to care. Whether you're a nurse, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a teacher, sometimes we get tired. And sometimes it's our season is up and it's time to pivot. Don't make people pay because you refuse to pivot because you're afraid. Someone in that vulnerable state is trusting you. Their families is trusting you with their life. Pivot if you need to. That's for somebody. So the CEO goes wash my mom's feet, and they're taking real good care of her. She's giving her burp baths and everything. The Bible says that even kings and queens will come and bring your children. Kings and queens will take care of you. God took care of us. My mother, I began to rehab her because they refused to, because they weren't a rehab facility. I did my research, brought the balls, the bands. I said, if you want to live, you have to fight. And I told my mother, if you ain't got skin in the game, baby girl, then I don't have skin in the game either. You have to fight for your own life. You want to live, you want to walk again, you want to talk again. She couldn't talk, she couldn't eat. It was horrible. Had to go back in the lab, pray. God, my mom wants to eat. She has the will to eat, but she can't. She can't. And God said, well, they took her whole freaking esophagus, her whole colon, so her whole colon. What happened? The gas, the gastro gas has nowhere to go but up her esophagus. So it did. And because of it, it was closed and food kept getting stuck. So I went to the hospital. Jesus, sorry. I went to the hospital the next day and I asked the doctor, and he came in. He came in, the doctor, he said, I heard about you and your aunt who works for the VA. And I said, good. And I said, doctor, since you're going to let my mother die, go ahead and humor me. Yeah, go ahead and humor me and check her esophagus. She has the will to eat. Her mind is coming back. She doesn't want to be on this TPN, which you guys keep harassing me about getting her off. But on the same token, y'all ain't paying for it, so y'all gonna stop harassing me about it. But humor me. Check my mother's esophagus. Most likely there's ulcers up and down her esophagus due to the gases coming up because she doesn't have a colon, and it could be eroding her esophagus like it would a pipe. They go in. They have to do an emergency stretch of her esophagus. I'd never even heard of that before. They go in, stretch her esophagus. That same day she could eat. It was God. It was God who told her not to get her colon removed, but she was in a space. We got to be careful, ladies and gentlemen, when we in a space and we depress and we down. We let people cut on us, take body parts that shouldn't be taken. And we never ask God, is this what you want? During that time, I prayed, God, I never seen my mother happy. I'm 40. I was almost going on 40. And I had never seen my mother happy. I think it was 41, right? 40. Yeah. So I had never seen my mother happy. And I was like, God, I want to see my mother happy. And then shortly after, my mother was transferred from the acute care hospital to nursing home. No, rehab center. She went to a rehab center and then a nursing home. So regular hospital, acute care hospital, rehab center, the nursing home. And 5 months felt like a whole year. Geez, my knees. There's more stories, but I won't bore you all. Because I began to rehab her in the acute care hospital, they were able to transfer her to the rehab center. So I already had her, stretched and worked out. Also, hold on, let me get some tissue. Woo. One of the things hold on, I gotta take a break. Woo. How do I pause?